Hey, this is Seth Parnell, the minister of the Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 164 of the Midweek Bible Study. Hope that you are doing well, hope that things are going your way, and we appreciate you being here with us tonight. Probably rained a little bit if you're in our local area, probably rained a little bit where you're at, rained a little bit over here, but it's a good little rainy day. I'm still able to get out and run a little bit, and so it didn't rain all day, and so you can still be productive if you have to do some things outside. But still, hope you've had a good day. And as we always say, we appreciate you being here. If you're someone who is in our local area, then we invite you to come to the Portia Church of Christ sometime. And right now, we are meeting at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, 5 o'clock on Sunday night, and 6 o'clock on Wednesday night. Right now, we are taking a look at a class on the Trinity, on the power and the authority of God on Sunday morning, and we're going through the book of Acts on Wednesday night as far as our classes go. And so hopefully, if you're in our area, you can come see us. We'd love to be able to study with you, love to be able to just worship with you and get to know you a little bit better. And so I know you have that available if you're in our area. Also, if you have any suggestions or any comments about your future episodes, then please feel free to send that my way as well. I'd love to hear what you have to say and hear what you think about our study tonight. As we continue to go forward, we always want to improve. We always want to get better. And so if you have any of those, please feel free to send those our way as well. But as far as announcements go, I don't think I have anything else. And so we will jump right into our study here for tonight. But it's good to have Jackie Henry here. Hope that you are doing good. It's always good having you here with us. And we also got Daniel Wilkerson. Hope you are doing good. I appreciate it. Always doing a great job. I appreciate it. Hope that you have had a wonderful day where you're at as well. But we're going to be in Exodus chapter 16. Exodus chapter 16 is where we're going to be tonight. We're going to take a look at a pretty interesting event that took place when the children of Israel got out of Egypt and they were on their way to the promised land. As we know, that was a process that took quite a bit of time. It took a long time, years upon years, in fact, for the Israelites to get from the borders of Egypt all the way to the borders of the promised land. And even after they got to the promised land, it still took even more because the Israelites were disobedient to God. And so they have a very long and arduous journey ahead of them. And the saying that we find here in Exodus chapter 16 takes place when their supplies and the things that they have brought from Egypt begin to run low. And they are figuring out that they're not going to be able to sustain themselves like they did, back in Egypt, traveling out here in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the wilderness. And so they start to complain against Moses and saying, you have brought us out here to kill us. You brought us out here to starve to death because we don't have any supplies or anything to eat. And so basically saying, Moses, what are you going to do about this? You brought us out here, you fix, this problem. And so God is going to do something for them that really is, it's not one of the most, you might say, flashy miracles, but it's one of the more interesting ones, I think, when you really take a look at it, because this is going to be one of the longest running miracles that's going to take place, that I think that we read about in the Bible. This is going to go from the time that we read here in Exodus chapter 16 all the way to the time in which they actually enter the promised land, where they actually enter the land of Canaan and begin to eat of the land there. And this is a long period of time. I believe over around 40 years, I think. And so this is a miracle that goes on every single day, all through all these years, feeding this massive group of people. And that's something that's pretty spectacular when you think about it. But let's read a little bit here, and let's read a little bit of what Exodus chapter 16 has to say. This entire story is told in chapter 16, and so we're not going to be able to get to all of it here tonight, but we'll get to a little bit of it, and we'll make some points and see what they're up to here, and see if we can learn anything from it, as we always do. But it's good to see Donna here. Hope that you are doing well. She says that she is watching. Hope that you are feeling good and doing good. Always appreciate you being here with us tonight. In Exodus chapter 16, and starting in verse 1, it says, "They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, and on the 15th day of the second month, after they had departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. And you have brought us out here into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. And on the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. And so Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, At evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us? And Moses said, When the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumbling, that you have grumbled against him. What are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord. And of course, this is in Exodus chapter 16. And so this, of course, takes place, as they are leaving Egypt. And when you look at the map between of how the Israelites left Egypt and got to the promised land, they didn't exactly take the shortest route, but they took a very circular route, going through the Red Sea and going through the wilderness in order to eventually get there. And as you know, in order to feed over 1 million people at this time, that takes a lot of supplies, and there was no way that they could carry enough to sustain them for a very long period of time. And so if you've ever cooked for a big family gathering or a big event, that sometimes it takes a lot in order to feed a lot of people. And with this great multitude, with this great body of people, they went through a lot of food, a lot of water, a lot of supplies and resources, every single day. And so as they're going throughout the wilderness, they realize, that we have a problem here. We are not going to be able to last to the promised land with the supplies that we have. And so in Israelite fashion, they don't really come to Moses and bring this concern to him in a constructive way or in a positive way. They could have come up to Moses and say, well, we're concerned about this. What do you think we should do, or how do you think we should proceed from here? They could have talked to Moses. They could have found a solution to this problem, but instead, in true Israelite fashion, what do? So that they grumbled against him. And in verse 1, of course, it says that they set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which can also be, there can also be a Z there when you translate that, so it could be Sin or Zin. It doesn't really have anything to do with, sin as far as, being separated from God, and it doesn't really have anything to do with that. But it's just the name of the wilderness out there. But between Elim and Sinai, and then it gives the date of when this happened. And then in verse 2, it says, the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And so this is not just like a few people. And, as you know, especially when you're dealing with a large group of people, it's very rare, or if ever, you're going to make everyone happy. Usually there's someone that's going to be unhappy with your situation. There's someone who's going to think that you should be doing things a little bit different. And so you're never going to make everyone happy with what you do. But In this case, it says that the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. They all they all started to complain and started to grumble and started to, lash out, at Moses and Aaron because, of this fact. And like we said before, there's constructive ways in which they could have brought this concern to Moses, but instead, they choose to grumble against him. And so this entire body, is now lifting up their voices, not in praise, not in, worship, but in complaint, against Moses and Aaron. And they're concerned about, being able to survive, this wilderness. And so in verse 3, it says, and the people of Israel said to them, would we that have died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full? For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly, with hunger. And if you're familiar with the Exodus story, you know that this line here at the bottom, for you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger. It's not the first time that this has been said, but this was said when they were on the edge of the Red Sea and the Egyptians were coming down on them and they couldn't see a way out. What did they say to Moses? You have brought us out here in this land, to kill us. A lot of times, those who complain aren't the most creative, and so they use this same line, many times throughout their Exodus, journey. And so they say, the people of Israel, said to them, he said that they recall and they go back to the land of Egypt and say, remember what we had in Egypt. Remember what we had there, where we had meat and we ate bread to the full. Remember what it was like, back in Egypt. And if you remember, the description of what it was like, going back to Egypt, how did the Israelites, react, to their condition in Egypt? It says they cried out to God. They cried out to him in anguish, seeking a deliverer. When God's talking to Moses at the burning bush, he says, I have heard the people cry out to me, and I've heard their suffering. And so I want you to go and deliver them. And so they had, this, their memory is, they have this selective memory process where they only remember the good things and not the fact that they were slaves and that they were living lives of hardship and living lives of subjugation in Egypt. That's not what they recall, but yet the only thing they do recall is, we had meat and we had, bread, to the full. And that's, what they recall. And so that's what they use in order to make this case, against, Moses. You're basically saying, if you had left us alone, we wouldn't have starved to death. We would have had bread, we would have had meat, and we would have been good, even though they leave out the fact that they would still be a subjugated, people. And so there's a couple of different things I think we can see just in this first part, before we continue on and see, God's solution to this, as we just read, is to provide, bread, to these people and to give them, what they need. But it's good to see Carlene here with us. Hope that you are doing well. Hope everything is going your way. We also got the Dunlaps with us. Hope you guys have had a great day as well. And Ted Knight here is with us. Hope you are doing good. Always appreciate you being here with us as well. But like I said, there's a couple of things that we could take a look at here in this early part of Exodus chapter 16. And the first is that there's going to be times, especially in civil situations, in the church, or in many different situations, there's going to be times in which an issue arises that needs to be addressed, or you have a concern, or you have a fear about something that is going on, and it's something that needs to be addressed. But when you have that concern, you don't just need to bury your head in the sand and ignore it. But sometimes, like I said, these things need to be looked at. But when you realize that you as the individual have a choice to make, or you have an opportunity to make of how you're going to present, that concern. Now, you can either follow the example, of the Israelites and complain, and grumble, and accuse. That's what they do. They accuse Moses and Aaron of wrongdoing, even though Moses and Aaron had proven their dedication to Israel several times over at this point, but yet they accuse them of wrongdoing. They complain and they grumble against them, and that's how they voice their concern. One of the This is one of the things that really hurts the unity of the body of Christ, is when people adopt this mentality of, this is how I voice my concern, by complaining and by grumbling and by accusing people of being negligent in their responsibilities. That takes a big hit to the unity of a congregation, I believe. But as we said, if these things do need to be addressed, then how do we handle this? Well, we can go to those who are in charge, like if it's the elders of the church, or if it's another situation of a person in authority, whatever it might be. We can go to them and we can respectfully voice our concern, and voice the issue that we have, and ask what is the plan going forward, or what should we do, how should we solve this problem. And most of the time we can join together and we can solve the issue that is at hand. But if we accuse and if we complain, oftentimes that brings up bad feelings. It damages relationships. It turns our focus from, instead of doing the work of God, into going against each other, which is a environment that is great for what Satan wants, but not great for what we need as the church. And so it's we always need to be sure that when we do voice our concerns and our opinions, that we do so in a respectful manner. We do it in a constructive manner, and then we do it with love in our heart, and we don't fall into this trap that the Israelites did. Because if we're honest, what the Israelites do here is a whole lot easier than doing it the right way, than doing it in a constructive way. It's easy to, go to your friend, or to, just, speak to the air and grumble and complain and accuse, like they did here. It's much easier to do that than it is to actually, go to the person, voice your concern with respect and love, and seek a solution and seek a way forward. But that's what we need to do, as people. It takes leaders and members in order to push us, forward. And so we always need to be cognizant of what we do. Farrell Nicholson, he's here. Good to see you. He says, we dwell on 5 bad days at the expense of 360 good ones. Yeah. They had forgotten, what God had done for them. They had forgotten, the crossing of the Red Sea, the 10 plagues that had taken place, their salvation, from the Egyptian army. They forgot all of that, when they started having these bad days of, well, we might be running out of food. We might be running out of supplies here. And so, yeah, sometimes we when things go bad and we get into a bad situation, sometimes we forget all about that good that is done, and we begin to focus on that. But it says you said that all 3 of them are watching. Well, it's good to have you guys. Hope you guys are doing good. But so that there is a way in which we can bring these issues to the table and then put them out there. Like I said, we don't need to just, ignore everything, and, bury our head in the sand. There's some things that need to be addressed, but we need to do it, we need to do it respectfully, without accusing people, without grumbling, or complaining. And so we have that, to address, as well. And so the people, they grumble, they grumble, against Moses and Aaron here in the wilderness, and they say that when we have died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by these pots of meat and ate bread to the full, And he says that you brought us out here in order to kill us. And so we also have an opportunity as people who have limited time here on this earth. We have a choice of what we can use with our voice. Like I said, they lifted up their voice there in verse in verse 2. He says the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. They lifted up their voice in that manner. We can praise God, we can glorify God, we can lift up the name of God, we can encourage one another, we can show love to one another, we can use our voice for those things, or we can use it for what the Israelites used here in this case. Like James puts it in James chapter 3, the tongue is something that is like a wildfire. It's like poison sometimes. It can be used to bless and it can be used to curse. And so when we consider what we use our voice and the influence that our speech and the words that we have can have, we need to spend a lot more time praising, a lot more time encouraging, a lot more time loving than we do what the Israelites are doing here. And because if we do that, it's going to, even though it may be more difficult, it's going to be something that's good for us in the long run. Because if we can praise you in that manner, we know that we will be doing good. And so in verse 4, we have the solution to this, where it says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for you. And the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I might test them, whether they shall walk in my law or not." And so God's solution to this is what we refer to and what the Israelites are going to call manna, which was a fine substance that later on is going to be described as like a coriander seed. And so this is going to fall from heaven. It's going to cover the ground kind of like frost. And they're going to go out and gather up an omer, which is about 2 quarts. Each person is going to gather what they need for that day. And then they would grind it into flour, and they would either bake it on a pan or boil it in some manner. And that's how they would be fed in the wilderness. They're going to have quail in the evening, and then this would be in the morning. And there's been some people who have tried to think of some natural things that this could have been, but this was a supernatural act from God. And so he puts this down, and he's going to feed the children of Israel all the way to the promised land with this substance. And so it's described a little bit as a flaky, like I said, like a flaky coriander substance that's really fine. They would have to grind up and bake. And so even though God provided this for them, they still had to go out and gather it. They still had to process it. And they still had to bake it or cook it for themselves. And so it wasn't all that easy, but still they were being provided for. And God even gives them a special provision on the sixth day. As you know, one of the 10 commandments was to remember the Sabbath day, to remember that and to keep it holy. And so they were to, be someone who observed the Sabbath still. And so they would gather twice as much on the sixth day. And then they would keep, a day's portion with them. And they would continue to, they would eat that on the Sabbath day. And as we'll find out later on here, there is not everyone is good at following instructions, and the children of Israel were a group of people just like that. And I think that we can probably empathize with that, because sometimes we're not the best at following instructions. At least I know I'm not. But they're going to fail at a couple different points here, in which God gives them. But he this substance comes down to the ground. And in verse 7, he says, "In the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us?" And Moses is going to be kind of stern with them, be kind of direct with them for good reason, because they had grumbled against him. And he says, God is not going to bring you out here in order to die, but God is going to provide for you if that's what it takes. And certainly he is going to do that. And if you recall, there's also a scene in which they run out of water, in which they don't have water to drink. And Moses, on a couple of different occasions, provides them with water, and either out of a stone, by speaking to it or by striking it, and he does this as well. And so God is going to be a provider, for them. And so the Moses is going to tell them, he's going to give them meat in the evening and this bread, in the morning. And down here in it's at the end of verse 8 here. He says, because the Lord has heard your grumbling, you grumble against him. What are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord. And so their complaint, their grumbling against Moses and Aaron wasn't necessarily just against them, but it was against the direction that God was leading them. Because God was the one who was guiding Moses forward. He was guiding him on where to go. And so they were essentially saying, God, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know, you don't have an idea of what you're doing here, because we're going to starve out here if we're not careful. Sometimes we think that we have better ideas than what God has given us, that we have that we maybe have a better way of doing things. But I think we usually find out in the end that God is God for a reason, and his wisdom is something that cannot be contended with, which is something that Job finds out in the last couple of chapters in the book of Job. And he comes face to face with God. God's wisdom is something that is more than we can know. But Moses, he lets them know that they are grumbling against God, and not just against them. And so when we think about this, and we think about what things that we can learn from this, there's a couple of things that we'll probably end on here tonight. And as I said, we're not going to be able to process this entire chapter. It's a pretty full chapter as far as things that we can take from it. And I enjoy reading throughout the book of Exodus and seeing the ups and the downs that the children of Israel had. But a couple of things I think that we can get from this is that, first off, is that, of course, there's this warning against being a people that that is fearful of the current situation. A lot of times we can look at our current situation and say that it's not great, and see that it's kind of bad, and we get fearful of that, and we start pointing our anxiety, pointing our some of more of our negative feelings towards God. And we start to complain, and we start to grumble, and we start to sometimes even accuse God of wrongdoing, because we can't really see past our present circumstances. And that's not to say that when you pray to God, you don't have to say nice words when you pray to God. You can be 100% honest with God. If you're afraid, if you're mad, if you're feeling those emotions, you can bring that to God. God already knows what's in our heart, and so you're not telling him anything that he doesn't already know. But sometimes we're blinded, kind of what what Pharaoh said. Sometimes we're blinded by our current circumstances, and so that causes us to kind of send out those negative things either to other people or to God. But as we know, life is full of ups and downs. Sometimes we got to go through the downs in order to get to the ups. And if we're someone who is faithful, for someone who runs with endurance, as Paul talks about, and as James talks about, how that endurance builds character, and that character produces other good things. There in James chapter 1. We know that we're going to be all right, even though the current situation may not be good. we're going to be all right because God is there with us. Which leads us to the last thing, is that God is someone who is a provider. God is always going to give us, what we need in order, to get through. Now, as later on, Israel's going to start complaining about this manna and say, "This is, we're sick of this. We've had too much of this. Sometimes we don't get what we want, but God does give us, what we need. When God calls us to be a Christian, calls us to live a life that is, you know, a life that is glorifying to God, a life that is full of love, not only for God, but also for the people that are around us, for our neighbors. He doesn't give us something impossible to do, but he always gives us what we need in order to accomplish that. If you wonder, how can I be pleasing to God? God has given us the scriptures. He has given us the Bible, the Word of God, so that we can read and we can understand what the will of God, is. And so we have what we need in order to be faithful Christians, in order to be servants of God, in order to glorify His name in those big things. And so God is a provider, and just as He provided Israel, with bread to eat and with meat to eat, He gives us the things that we need as well. And so, as a Christian, we know things aren't always going to be good, and we know we're going to have some rough times, but we know that we have available to us all that we need in order to look forward to those promises that God has given us. And God is faithful. And He is not slow concerning His promises, but He is faithful to all those who are obedient to Him. And so that's a comforting thing, an inspiring thing to know about God. And that's the God that we serve. And He's a big and gracious God. And we can be forever thankful for His love and His dedication to giving us that. If when we were dealing with this problem of sin, God didn't stop even when it took the very life of His Son, His only begotten Son. He still gave us what we need. He gave us salvation so we can have freedom from sin. And now there's nothing standing between us and God, but we can approach Him, and we can be someone that can look forward to being with Him one day. And that's a wonderful thing to dwell on. But I think that's all that we're going to have here for tonight. Appreciate everyone being here with us. We've had a lot of people in the comments, and so I appreciate that. I appreciate everyone being here tonight and saying hi and giving your comments. That's always a great thing to have, and so I really, really appreciate everyone being here tonight. We'll be back here next Thursday night for another episode, number 165, of the midweek Bible study. And we're working on some special episodes. Like I think we're gonna have some more focused episodes coming up. And so I think I hope you'll enjoy those. But until then, I guess that we will get out of here, and we hope that you have a wonderful night, and hope to see you next time. And so when you go out there, I hope that you can glorify God and praise Him in everything that you do. We'll see you next time.